Hello, all you freedom-loving people. President Trump plans to protect freedom of belief. Food stamp funding is on its way. Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin will stand trial, but will we be able to see him? And 2 men were charged in the ISIS-linked terrorist plot. Okay, let's get into it. Today, 2 suspects were charged in connection with the alleged terrorist attack that was linked to ISIS in Michigan. The 72-page criminal complaint, which was unsealed in federal court, alleged that the 2 men purchased high-powered weapons and practiced at gun ranges. They were planning a violent attack over Halloween weekend in suburban Detroit. The 2 20-year-old suspects and their co-conspirators, including a minor, were allegedly inspired by ISIS terrorism to carry out the alleged plot. The suspects were allegedly scouting potential LGBT bars in Ferndale as a possible venue for the attack. The court filing noted that agents even positioned a camera on a pole outside a residence to surveil the suspects. Attorney Hussein Bazi, who represents one of the suspects, said that the Pumpkin Day reference in the alleged plot may have been online gamer chat that was misinterpreted. The 2 suspects, who briefly appeared in federal court today, were charged with receiving and transferring firearms and ammunition for terrorism, and they will stay in custody until their scheduled November 10th detention hearing. If convicted of charges, each suspect could face up to 15 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine. Attorney General Pam Bondi wrote on X, according to the complaint, subjects had multiple AR-15 rifles, tactical gear, and a detailed plan to carry out an attack on American soil. Our American heroes prevented a terror attack. And regarding the suspect in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Erica Kirk announced today that she rejects the idea of barring cameras from the courtroom in the trial of her husband's alleged killer. Her announcement came after a judge last week ruled that media outlets are prohibited from taking certain video footage and photos of the suspect during all upcoming pretrial hearings. This means that they cannot record him entering or exiting the courtroom, or when he's standing up, or when he's seen in shackles. But regarding cameras in the courtroom, the judge said that he wasn't yet ready to rule on what limits he would place. Judge Tony Graff also ruled that suspected assassin Tyler Robinson could wear street clothes during the hearings, but must be restrained. Robinson's next hearing is set for January 16, 2026, when he's expected to make his first in-person court appearance. During an interview with Jesse Waters, in response to the ruling on camera use, Erica Kirk said she wants transparency.
There were cameras all over my husband when he was murdered. There have been cameras all over my friends and family mourning. There have been cameras all over me, analyzing my every move, analyzing my every smile, my every tear. We deserve to have cameras in there. Why not be transparent? There's nothing to hide. I know there's not, because I've seen what the case is built on. Let everyone see what true evil is. This is something that could impact a generation and generations to come.
So far, Robinson has made only 1 virtual appearance before Judge Graff, and he was seen wearing jail garb and an anti-suicide smock. Robinson faces a number of charges, including aggravated murder, so he could face the death penalty, but he is yet to enter a plea. Today, Trump administration officials said that the Department of Agriculture, the USDA, will be funding food stamps for November at reduced levels. The lawyers for the Trump administration said in a court filing that the USDA will spend billions of dollars in contingency funds, but it will not be using any additional money. And in a separate document, the administration asked states to calculate reductions for recipients of food stamps. The new filing came as funding for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which provides food assistance to low-income families, ran out on Saturday as Congress failed to reach an agreement to reopen the government. According to Patrick Penn, who oversees SNAP, there are roughly $5.2 billion in food aid contingency funds, but fully covering November benefits would require roughly $9 billion. Previously, a federal judge issued a last-minute ruling directing the Trump administration to use emergency funds to cover November food stamps. Then a federal court in Rhode Island ordered on Saturday for the Trump administration to submit a plan by today to fully fund food assistance benefits or make at least partial payments by Wednesday. President Trump has instructed officials to find legal avenues to fund the program. President Trump wrote, "I do not want Americans to go hungry just because the radical Democrats refuse to do the right thing and reopen the government. Therefore, I have instructed our lawyers to ask the court to clarify how we can legally fund SNAP as soon as possible." However, even if emergency federal funds are secured immediately, the suspension of food stamps is already a reality as states require time to distribute the benefits. The good news is, when asked by CNN's State of the Union whether he could comply with the federal judge's order to begin partial SNAP payments starting Wednesday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent responded, "It's possible. There's a process that has to be followed, so we've got to figure out what the process is." He also explicitly stated that the Trump administration would not appeal the court's ruling. Over the weekend, President Trump threatened military action in Nigeria if the West African country does not do more to halt the killing of Christians. President Trump earlier announced that he had declared Nigeria a country of particular concern because of the existential threat posed to its Christian population. He said thousands have been killed. The U.S. State Department may provide for sanctions against countries engaged in severe violations of religious freedom. The designation came after U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, who is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and some American celebrities, stated that Christians are being persecuted in Nigeria. On Saturday, President Trump wrote in a Truth Social post that he had instructed the U.S. Department of War to prepare for possible action. He wrote, "If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria and may very well go into that now disgraced country guns a-blazing to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities." Replying to President Trump's message, War Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the Department of War is preparing for action. Either the Nigerian government protects Christians or we will kill the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities. However, Nigeria denies Christians are being persecuted. Daniel Bwala, a spokesperson for Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, told the Associated Press on Sunday that Ted Cruz and President Trump relied on old reports from more than a decade ago, when Nigeria's homegrown Boko Haram Islamic group launched an insurgency to enforce their brutal interpretation of Sharia law, despite persistent claims of the recent escalation in the persecution. But he also acknowledges the persecution by saying, when it comes to matters of military operation in Nigeria, this is a matter that two leaders have to agree on. It's not something unilaterally you can do, especially since that country is a sovereign country, and that country is not aiding and abetting that crime. And the Associated Press tried to downplay the persecution and claimed that both Christians and Muslims are killed in Nigeria's security crisis, and that victims are often determined by their location and not due to their religion. But according to Intersociety, the International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law, approximately 125,009 Christians have been killed in Nigeria since 2009. Based on the same report, in 2024 alone, 3,100 Christians were killed and 2,830 were kidnapped. Intersociety also argued that in 2025, multiple reports indicate that over 7,000 Christians were killed and 7,800 kidnapped in the first 220 days, which is an average of about 32 to 35 deaths per day. Intersociety also said that Islamist terrorist groups, including Boko Haram and jihadist Fulani bandits, were responsible for the killings and kidnappings of Christians in Nigeria. Open Doors, an organization that tracks violence against Christians, reports that more Christians are killed for their faith in Nigeria than in the rest of the world combined. The president of Nigeria plans to meet with President Trump next week to discuss the persecution. Yesterday, President Trump was flying back to Washington, D.C. after the weekend in Palm Beach, Mar-a-Lago, and he held a press gaggle aboard Air Force One during the flight. Talking with reporters, President Trump was asked by a reporter if the United States would put boots on the ground in Nigeria.
On Nigeria, just wanted to ask you, do you envisage U.S. boots on the ground?
Could be. I mean, a lot of things I envisage, a lot of things. They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria. And they have other countries very bad also. You know that part of the world, very bad. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen.
And in response to further questions, President Trump announced that the United States, for now, will not sell or trade Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine.
Will your administration provide Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk missiles? Is that something that you're not considering that?
No, not really.
Mr. President, on Friday,
Could happen, I could change, but at this moment I'm not.
President Trump was also asked if he has any final straw that would demonstrate to him that Russia isn't ready to end the war in Ukraine.
There's no final straw. Sometimes you have to let it fight out. And they're fighting it out. And it's been a tough war for Putin. He's lost a lot of soldiers, maybe 1 million. That's a lot of soldiers. And it's been tough for Ukraine. It's been tough with both. Sometimes you have to let it, just get poured out.
And there's also the news about possible war with Venezuela after the Pentagon increased operations in the Caribbean in recent months. President Trump was interviewed by CBS News anchor Norah O'Donnell for a 60-minute show on Friday. The interview was recorded at Mar-a-Lago and was aired yesterday. 60 Minutes aired about 27 minutes of the interview on TV, and it published the longer version, which was 73 minutes, online. And during the interview, President Trump said that he doubts the United States will go to war against Venezuela. He said, "I doubt it. I don't think so. But they've been treating us very badly, not only on drugs, they've dumped hundreds of thousands of people into our country that we didn't want." President Trump was also pressed about whether recent moves were intended to target drug cartels or to change the regime of Venezuela. In response, President Trump described it as a move to curb both the growing wave of Venezuelan migrants entering the United States and the flow of drugs through the Caribbean. And when asked if the days of Venezuelan President Maduro are numbered, President Trump replied, "I would say yeah, I think so, yeah." But President Trump refused to comment on the possibility of land strikes against Venezuela. The New York City mayoral election has captured nationwide attention with a fiercely contested race. Democratic candidate Zohran Mamdani and independent candidate Andrew Cuomo remain neck and neck in the polls, driving up voter turnout. The 9-day early voting period concluded on Sunday. According to the New York City Board of Elections, over 730,000 early votes were cast, which is more than 4 times the 170,000 early votes that were recorded in the previous mayoral election in 2021. Evan Roth-Smith, a polling expert at Slingshot Strategies, told the New York Post that the New York City mayoral election will be the most fiercely contested and closely watched mayoral race since 2001. Smith said that, including Election Day on November 4th, at least 1.9 million voters are expected to turn out, which could potentially surpass the 1.5 million votes that were cast during Republican Michael Bloomberg's victory in 2001. This time, Chinese American voters, who have traditionally shown little interest in politics, turned out in large numbers. Their turnout was even higher than during last year's presidential election. Most Chinese American voters support Cuomo. Many are concerned about Socialist Mamdani winning after they left Communist China, and they turned out to vote specifically in order to prevent Mamdani from being elected. However, some Chinese also support Mamdani, with the vast majority being young Chinese. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is also countering Mamdani's influence in his own way. Mamdani advocates for reducing police funding. Last Friday, Mayor Adams announced an additional investment in the city's updated physical plan for November, which will enable the New York City Police Department, the NYPD, to recruit 5,000 new officers, bringing the total number of uniformed personnel at the agency to 40,000. The 40,000-strong police force will be the largest in New York City in 20 years. The new recruitment initiative will commence in July of 2026 with an initial intake of 300 additional police officers. This will increase to 2,500 officers by July of 2027, and it will reach an annual intake of 5,000 officers by July of 2028. Ken Friedman, a Democratic political operative and longtime police union advisor, said Eric Adams invested in his legacy as a law and order mayor and launched a preemptive strike against a Mayor Mamdani defunding the police. But Cuomo praised Adams' decision. Cuomo said, "We have one of the lowest levels of police officers in modern political history. We're losing police officers, one of the highest rates of attrition, because they're so short-staffed and have to work all the time." Zoram said that he is against the additional police officers. Now, there are only two options. Either Mamdani knows more about public safety than Mayor Adams, who happened to have been a police officer for 22 years, a mayor of the city of New York, and borough president of Brooklyn, or he knows more than Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, who he thinks is good because he asked her to come on, and she says we need 5,000 more police. Cuomo also criticized Mamdani's campaign as just political schemes. He said it's just a political ideology, a statement of the ideology of the Democratic Socialists of America, of which he is a card-carrying member. Cuomo went on to say that socialists are against the police. He said, "Remember, this is a man who said the NYPD is racist, wicked, and corrupt, and a security threat." In the mayoral election polls, Cuomo is narrowing the gap with frontrunner Mamdani. But the final outcome will depend on whether Cuomo can secure a significant lead in tomorrow's final vote. The standoff between Dutch chipmaker Nexperia and China has finally seen a breakthrough. The looming production shutdown crisis in the global automotive industry can now be averted. Following the U.S.-China summit, China's Ministry of Commerce announced on Saturday that it would exempt certain Nexperia chips from export restrictions. The Ministry of Commerce of the CCP stated, "We will comprehensively consider the actual circumstances of enterprises and grant exemptions to eligible exports." This provision is also part of the agreements that were reached during the U.S.-China summit in South Korea. Nexperia is one of the world's largest manufacturers of basic semiconductor chips, producing components such as transistors that are technically straightforward yet in high demand. Approximately 70% of Nexperia's products are assembled at its Dongguan factory in China. Beijing's restrictions on Nexperia chip exports have caused a semiconductor shortage for automakers. Japanese automaker Honda has suspended production at its plants in the United States and Mexico. Additionally, Volkswagen has warned that disruptions in Nexperia chip supplies could impact production. The Motor Equipment Manufacturers Association, the largest automotive parts supplier association in the United States, also stated that due to the conflict between the Netherlands and China over Nexperia, U.S. automakers are only 2 to 4 weeks away from halting production. In last week's report, we detailed the full story of the conflict between the Netherlands and the Chinese Communist Party over Nexperia. So what does this have to do with the trade framework agreement reached between the United States and China? On the surface, this is related to the latest U.S. regulatory measures. On September 30th, the U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security issued new regulations introducing the 50% rule, which expands U.S. export restrictions to cover all subsidiaries in which a sanctioned company holds more than a 50% equity stake. Wingtech Technology, the Chinese parent company of Nexperia, was added to the entity list in December of 2024. This means that Nexperia Semiconductors, as a wholly owned subsidiary of Wingtech Technologies, also follows under the scope of these new regulations. In June of this year, the United States informed the Netherlands that it must remove the CEO of Nexperia to avoid trade restrictions. Now, according to a document released by the White House, the United States will suspend for 1 year the implementation of the 50% penetration rule export controls announced on September 29th, while China will suspend for 1 year the implementation of export control measures related to Wingtech products announced on October 9th. So you may wonder why Nexperia's products, which are low-end chips mostly manufactured using mature processes, have become subject to restrictions. Experts have provided an explanation. Su Zhiyan, the director of the Institute of Strategy and Resources at the Taiwan Institute for National Defense and Security Research, told the Epoch Times that while Nexperia Semiconductors products are based on mature processes, the manufacturing techniques and know-how involved are distinct. These factors ultimately determine the product's yield rate and performance. Although mainland China possesses mature manufacturing processes, their yield rate and chip stability may be relatively poor. Acquiring manufacturing techniques and know-how from other manufacturers could enhance its mature processes. The Dutch government's takeover of Nexperia is highly unusual. It signals that Western nations are now treating the relocation of mature manufacturing processes and entire production lines as sensitive technology that are subject to controls. And they are extending these beyond just items like 3-nanometer chips or AI accelerators. Beijing's reaction also indicates that this is not merely a commercial dispute. Feng Chongyi, an associate professor at the University of Tech Sydney, told the Epoch Times that the Netherlands should have taken this step long ago, since the CCP and the West are now effectively locked in a Cold War dynamic. The ongoing technological warfare, information warfare, trade wars, and tariff battles targeting the CCP are increasingly evolving toward a Cold War trajectory. However, Western countries do not currently define their relationship with the CCP as a Cold War, but rather a trade partnership. This raises the question, can this trade partner be trusted? Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, China has been an unreliable partner in many ways. Despite the agreement reached at the Xi-Trump summit to delay the implementation of rare earth export restrictions for 1 year, Washington's guard against Beijing has not been lowered as a result. He said in an interview on Fox News Sunday, the Chinese have cornered the market on rare earths, and unfortunately at times they proved to be unreliable partners. Bessent emphasized that despite the agreement reached between the U.S. and China, the United States and its allies must remain vigilant toward the Chinese Communist Party. Over the next 1 to 2 years, the U.S. will advance at an astonishing pace to break free from the CCP's control over America's rare earth supply. In an interview with CNN's State of the Union, Scott Bessent said, "We don't want to decouple from China, but we need to de-risk. They've shown themselves to be an unreliable partner in many areas." Bessent also accused previous U.S. governments of being asleep at the switch as Beijing spent years putting together its rare earth strategy. Bessent also said, "Now this administration, we're going to go at warp speed over the next 1-2 years, and we're going to get out from under the sword that the Chinese have over us, and they have it over the whole world." Bessent also stated that the CCP's rare earth threats are completely ineffective. Regarding Chinese export controls, Bessent said, "It's China versus the world. They put it on the whole world, and the whole world pushed back." Bessent said, "This time America has united its allies. Therefore, all Western democracies, Asian democracies, and India will join the United States in working together to build supply chains for democratic nations. The CCP's rare earth export restrictions have also prompted a countermeasure from the EU. The EU is seeking to collaborate with G7 partners to adopt a coordinated response. The EU has also proposed a new resource initiative, Resource EU. This initiative aims to secure alternative sources of critical raw materials for European industries in short, medium, and long term. Besant further stated that the notion that the Chinese Communist Party government would not at some point leverage critical minerals as bargaining chips is naive. He also said they've been planning this for 20 to 30 years. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.